Okay. Hello, everybody. My name is Jay Poss. There's my contact info. I'm going to do a pretty short presentation on how to use the HTML5
Except I don't like the steroid guys, so I'll just
Canvas tool to create on-screen keypads.
they're starting.
We'll go ahead and get going on it. It's I call it a keypad builder. It's all JavaScript plus HTML5 Canvas. How many of y'all are familiar with Canvas? I know last month Eric did a pretty extensive one on using it for animations. Eric's not here tonight, is he?
No, couldn't make it.
Yeah, it was real good. This is quite a bit different than what he did. To implement these keypads, I have two JavaScript modules. They're actually written in TypeScript and then compiled to JavaScript. Anybody else messing with TypeScript? Anybody know what TypeScript is? I like it pretty well. It seems to offer some good advantages, but we won't really get into that. A keypad is just simply a collection of related buttons. So what we're going to do in our keypad for each button that we put in the keypad, these are the attributes that we can control. So for each button, we can set its shape. Right now, I'm only supporting circles and rectangles. With Canvas, it's really the sky's the limit. I could add all kinds of shapes to it, but right now I just have those two. The size of the button, which depending on if it's a circle, you can tell it the radius, rectangle, the width and the height. You also set its color, shadow, transparency. I won't read through everything. So basically, we're going to have a bunch of buttons that are related together in this keypad, and for each button, we're going to say exactly how we want that button to look. Now, these attributes are going to be expressed both for its normal out state and for its press state. So it can have two completely different looks. It could be a different size, different color, different shadowing, pretty much different everything in those two states. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and show you 4 examples, and then we'll kind of get back and show how a little bit more information about them. Okay, this first one, this keypad just has 2 buttons in it. Stop button, go button. It's actually what I call a radio keypad, in that whenever you click one button, it's going to deactivate the other button that was active before that. And then there's a function called getVal that's built into the keypad object, and it will return the value of the button that's currently pressed. Does that make sense? So whenever we click on these buttons, let's see what I'm doing here. This is actually crazy. That thing is a little hyper. What is it doing? Okay, this will be fun. Good thing those buttons are big. Quit moving. So it's kind of slow motion. Now, it'll work. It's going from this computer to that computer and then through. It's acting a little weird. But so anyway, you can see when I click the go button, it changed its appearance there. You can tell that it's the selected button. And since this is a radio keypad, when I click on the other button, if I ever get there, oh my gosh, this is crazy. What is this thing doing?
This is the game, right?
Yeah.
It's a timer.
It's a very difficult game. Normally it's instantaneous. We've got little lags and things, I think, because of our setup here. But anyway, that was a pretty simple one. And then the getVal function, which is built into the keypad, should, if I ever get there, come on. It should return the value of the one that's clicked, which is good. Okay, the next keypad. This one is just a custom number keypad. Put the numbers in it, add a little different special functionality. I got a +1 button and a -1 button. the next button in this example doesn't actually do anything, but say you had an application and you wanted a custom keypad so they could put their numeric data in really quickly, and a normal keypad didn't fit your needs, you could, design one to do what you needed it to do. I'll go ahead and try to click on a few of them. Well, you can see when I click, these are normal buttons. When I click and release, it's going to change state. These are not toggle buttons. Okay, let me try this. Did I hit it?
Yeah.
I think that's the key. Thank you. Yeah, looking at the screen, much easier. Okay. And then the red X just leaks some. Anyway, you can see the way the button looks pressed. And okay, the next one is an alpha. It's real similar to that one, except it's just alpha keys. I also implemented something a little different. When you hit the little up arrow, it will change it to uppercase. So you can kind of dynamically modify the content of the keypad. And then the last one is just, these are all 4 toggle buttons. So unlike the radio one, when you click one and the other one pops up, this one, as you click them, they stay stuck down. And then the get values function, which is built in, will return. It'll return an array of all the values for the ones with the toggle, the state of its pressed is in. The steps for creating a keypad. The HTML side of it is really easy. You put a single HTML, a div statement in there. Use some CSS to set your size and your location, however you typically would do that. And then when you create the keypad object, this next line down there, the new J19.keypad, that div ID is the HTML ID of your div. Everybody cool with that? Makes sense? Mm-hmm. And that actually creates a canvas element inside that div. And the size of that canvas element is going to be the size of your div that you set up with CSS. Then you're going to create your button objects, and then there's the line of code to do that. The new J19 keypad button. The button params is a fairly long object literal, and I'm going to show you one in a minute, that specifies exactly how you want that button to look. And then we're going to put all of those button objects into an array. And then the last step is to execute the Keypad Setup method. And the background is going to specify the background would be like the green around the numbers. That's the background of that keypad. Just the keypad itself, what that background is going to look like. On this stop go one, it actually had a transparent background, so there wasn't any background for the keypad. The buttons is the array of buttons that were created. And options, right now we have one option. It's an object literal, and the only option in it right now is to say that the keypad is going to be a radio keypad. And if, well, let me explain that a little bit more here. The buttons can be the normal. When a normal button by default, when you press on it, it changes state to pressed. You let go of it, it goes to the out state. If it's set up as a toggle button, when you press it and release, it's going to stay stuck in until you press it and release it again, and it pops back out. If on the that option that I said before, this options on the keypad setup, that last parameter there, that's what that looks like. It says keypad setup option equals, and I got radio true. And that's going to automatically set every button in that keypad as a toggle button. But it's also going to make it so that every time a button is clicked, it's going to unselect the previous. So you always just have one button selected. I showed you in the examples, there's two methods that are built in. GetVal is going to return the one value. That would be what you would use for a radio keypad, because only one value should be active at a time. The GetVals is going to return an array of values for every toggle button that's pressed in. Does that make sense? Okay, this is you can actually put a whole lot of crap in this keypad button definition. This one is the button definition for find it. I think it's the first button, that forward button. I believe this is the definition for that button. So it is a toggle button. There's something in here that's a little bit confusing because this is like a quick overview. I'm not really going to explain it. This width and the height right here is something I'm trying to get away from, but it kind of defines the maximum rectangle that button can ever take with all its shadowing and everything. That's the rectangle that the button is erased and redrawn inside of. And I tried to get away where I could automatically calculate that area, and I had some issues with it. So for right now, I just say, okay, I'm going to hardwire it. Here's the height and the width that I want.
Can you set that as a percentage?
Yeah.
No, not for what. I think that's beyond the scope of this short conversation to really explain these two parameters. So I'm not going to really try not to get worried about those too much. Okay, the button type rectangle. Rectangles have a width and a height. If this was a circle, then we'd have a radius there. We wouldn't have out width and out height. We'd have the radius. If you do not set an in width and height, the state of the button is pressed in. If I don't specify those dimensions, then it's just going to automatically use whatever the out width. Most of these values will actually default to something if you don't specify them. Like on these, the button canvas, there are a lot of other options, but so on that forward button, we're saying we're just going to fill it in at 059, some kind of blue. The blur is a shadow blur. We're going to make it 3 pixels wide. The color of the blur or the shadowing is black. The shadow X and shadow Y are like how far over and down we want that shadow to move. Does that make sense? Then on the end button, you'll notice that the shadowing is -2 instead of positive, so the shadow is going to be on the top of the button. Well, I guess I should have done that. Anyway, what I was talking about, when the button is pressed out, the shadowing is down here. When it's pressed in, it's on the top to give it that kind of look. That's how you get that sunken look. Does this kind make sense?
Sort of. A little bit.
Okay.
What did you say alpha was again?
Okay, alpha in Canvas, it has something called a global alpha setting, and that's what that is. It's basically a transparency setting. What do they call it? Somebody probably knows what an alpha channel or.
Yeah, that's what it's called.
Yeah.
But it's really the amount of transparency. It defaults to a value of 1, and it can go all the way down to 0. It's between 0 and 1 is the alpha. A 1 is just completely opaque, you can't see through it, and like 0.5 would be somewhat transparent, 0.1 would be really transparent. Anything else on there that's you have a question on?
Where's the text?
Text is down. I haven't quite got. This is the rest of it. The text. The actual appearance of the text is when the button is pressed in is defined right there. So that's the color of it, the font size, and then the shadowing of it. The value that's going to display in the button is value forward. That's what will show up. If you want to have a different value for the button than a label on the button, you could come in here and say label equals something else. And then when you did the get val on it, you would get forward, but the label on it would show whatever. So you can have if you don't specify a label on a button, it's going to default to the value of the button. Uh-oh. Kick it.
Do you have to define each button individually, or is there some way to clone them?
What I do. Yes. That's a good question. His question was, do you create each button individually or do you clone them? What I normally do is I create a button definition. Like most all of that's going to be the same for every button. Except for like its value and its position. So what I do is I set those parameters up the way I want it for a button. And then I execute that code that creates the button, the new J19 keypad button, specifying the print of the keypad harness. And then when I go to create the next button, all I do is change the elements that are different in that parameter object, which most of them aren't different. Like I said, the location and the value are different.
So could you set up an array for both the position and the value, and then just call that array? You know what I mean? If you had a set layout, and you could just establish an array for the X and Y positions, and then establish an array for the values, and then just call it.
Yeah, you can do something like that.
Is it counterintuitive that the release function is execute on press, and the press function is execute on release?
Oh, yeah. I think I was typing I was in a hurry when I typed that, yeah. Good point.
Just seems counterintuitive.
I typed that in. Y'all see what that is? That's that executed on release, not press. I didn't set any of these attributes in this example. This status in out is kind of a biggie though. If you've got a bunch of toggle buttons and when you initially load the keypad, say you want a couple of them to be shown popped in to start with before anybody ever touches them, you can say the status is in on it and it'll show it popped in to start with. And then like I said before, the label, and this one the label would be equal to forward, but I could have it. That's what's going to actually be shown on the button. Let's see, we are just about out of time. I guess before I quit, is there any particular thing that's bugging or question?
Release function on release, or is that a toggle or what? You've got function execute on press or release function.
Yeah,
Yeah,
you just said that you accidentally.
Yeah, I accidentally typed that in wrong. This is reversed. These two are reversed.
It's like mouse out.
I didn't catch that.
So, without HTML5, let's say it hasn't been invented, what couldn't you do?
Well, I think just the possibility of creating. How would you create if you weren't using it? How would you create buttons? Just buttons in general. If you wanted to make them different shapes and different.
So is that?
Different everything about them.
Well, how
what
are you,
tool would you use?
how are you defining HTML5?
By the non-existent standard.
Well, it's not a,
Are you
as far as I
basically-
know, it's still not a standard until,
Are you
okay.
just trying to say if I didn't use Canvas, would there be another way to accomplish this that was
Yeah, I'm
pretty
trying to,
easily?
well, I think getting that was, how does HTML5 make your life easier? I know you can do everything without it, but, you know, obviously it's making certain things easier.
Well-
What specifically with respect to this argument?
Canvas just gives you so much power to affect how things look. I mean, you've got so much freedom. I mean, I could even, like I said, I could make buttons that are any kind of shape that you want, for one thing. You could include some little animations in the buttons. I mean, the sky's the limit. I'm not saying you can't do it another way, but anyway, what I came up with. I don't know, how are y'all doing buttons? I mean, are y'all doing
CSS.
Yeah, I mean, that's.
everything to CSS?
Right, but that's the big difference. CSS is taking an existing structure and applying styles to it. You have limitations. This is, you can draw whatever you want to the canvas.
Right.
And this is giving you something that's drawn to canvas
drawing.
and has all the JavaScript layer.
Well, a great analogy is if you can imagine like a cathode ray tube, like a TV, right? It can draw anything on the screen. Like to add colors, it can draw colors or whatever. Without that, with HTML4, as it were, you have to create discrete elements and apply CSS to each one of those elements. So he's drawing them. He's got this wrapper that actually creates buttons and adds gradients and adds like stroke fills and all different kinds of things that kind of give you that same functionality through Canvas. So Canvas also doesn't invoke the repaint or the layout changes page. So if you have an entire page that's laid out in Canvas, right, it's not going to suffer from like repaints. You're going to have 60 frames per second unless you're doing something, you know, greater than 16.7 milliseconds. That's a different topic, but it basically looked at it like that. It's like you're creating elements in HTML4 and you have to style each one, whereas he's got wrappers that create those elements in like, you know, free drawing environment.
So what are the current limitations though with the Canvas with regard to mobile technology?
The support of the standard.
It is supported in just about every browser mobile. I will say the way I implemented some of this does not execute efficiently on some of the mobile phones. And I figured out a better way to do it. The way I'm redrawing the buttons is a little bit too slow.
Well, I'm noticing a flicker on my iPad when I'm doing it. It goes white for a millisecond every time I
There's
push the button.
what I'm doing, each button in that predefined rectangle, I'm like doing a clear, and then I paint the background and paint the button. It's like
Right, so you're refreshing the screen every time you
right,
hit,
every time that button has to be redrawn.
and that's that white.
But
frame.
there's a better way to do it, but I just haven't. There's a better way to take it, like a picture of it before,
Right.
save it off, and then when you want to go back, put
You
that
flip
picture, flip that picture. I think that's a lot faster, but that's not the way I'm doing it right now. Yeah, there's, I mean, I think it's pretty solid. It works pretty well. I've actually created quite a few keypads with it, just playing around with it, and it seems to work real well. But there's a few areas that are a little, you know, need some improvements for sure. Just before I finish, unless y'all had any other hot question on this. If anybody is interested, I'm also working on a web service thing. It's a Python project, but the idea is I want to write HTML5 apps, but I want to be able to talk to a database real easily. And so I've got it pretty much written. I think it's going to work pretty well. And it's designed to run on these like cheap big hosters that have Apache and fast, got all what fast CGI is. Makes a real high performance way to get to things. And then also I've had this browser side data manager I wrote about 3 years ago. It's really pretty cool, but I haven't looked at it in a couple of years. But it would kind of work with this web service. So if anybody's really looking in the web service thing, how you get in, connecting with databases, that's kind of what I've really been focusing on the last month. But that's it.